This is Creating Your Encore Career and Becoming a Silver Entrepreneur with your host, Lynn Freest. Lynn will share ideas and expert advice from people that are walking in your shoes and living their encore careers, where they want and at the pace they want. You'll start a company of one with confidence and knowledge to live a fulfilled life of freedom and ease. Lynn is a coach and leadership consultant whose mission is to show senior leaders and experts how to start something refreshing and new after a full career in the corporate environment.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of the podcast, Creating Your Encore Career and Becoming a Silver Entrepreneur. This is episode 119, and it's about marketing as a relationship and not just an automation. And our conversation is with Duane Zingale. Making the leap from being a corporate leader and expert into becoming a solopreneur can be daunting, but the rewards are great. You can work when you want, where you want, and do the work you love. And I can be that guide and thinking partner for you. As your coach, I will help you go farther and faster based on what I've learned by being on this journey for several years. If you're having thoughts about starting an encore career, please contact me and take the self-assessment quiz. The quiz will help you get some quick clarity around what's possible for you in the future. After you listen to the podcast, I encourage you to visit my website at lynnfreest.com and download the PDF as a guide to help you take the next steps on pursuing starting your encore career. Today, we're talking with Duane Zingale. I met Duane through Mike Kim and his You Are the Brand program. Duane has made an interesting pivot in his life from ministry to marketing, and he'll talk about that. But also, it's interesting how Duane has looked deep inside his own life to build his understanding of how he does marketing. And also, Duane thinks in terms of movements and transformation, not just selling, as he works helping clients market themselves. Some of the questions we'll discuss today include how Duane pivoted his life's work from ministry to marketing, how he brings empathy to marketing, and it's not just about the automation. He will share his listen framework that he works with clients on, and also he'll talk about how working with small audiences can be rewarding. And that's, I think, especially important for experts and leaders that we may not be going for a huge audience, but Duane talks about how it can be rewarding even working with small audiences. Duane, welcome. It's great to have you on the show. I really appreciate you sharing your knowledge and insights. And to start with, I'd like you to introduce yourself and a little bit about your journey and who you help.
Hey, thanks for having me, Lynn. Yeah, absolutely. My name is Duane Zingale. First and foremost, I always love to say I'm a husband and a father. I have two amazing daughters. And really, in everything I do, I like to say I'm living a Lego fairy tale with my girls and in a room just down the hall, acquiring way too many toys for an adult. But I come from a ministry background. I was in the nonprofit Christian missions world for 10 years. And a little bit of that. Had our second daughter, and she had a special needs similar to mine. I have a syndrome called Treacher-Collins, which left her hard of hearing. And then some other things we just have stumbled our way through, discovering special needs and living in the ministry world, having to raise all your funds, traveling the world. While amazing, is really hard to do with two kids. And then you throw special needs in there, and it was time for a pivot. And when I made that pivot, I had just met a friend of ours, mutual friend of ours, Mike Kim, and that introduced me to the great wide world of marketing. You know, as a nonprofit mission guy, of course, marketing, no, that's bad. Bad people do marketing. Come to find out, some people apply the gifts and skill set of marketing in bad ways, but I actually fell in love with marketing. I just stumbled into it as I went, okay, how do I apply all these crazy skills of traveling the world, building itinerary for 20, 30, 40 people, filling out financial spreadsheets, recruiting. What does this even mean in the business world? I had no idea, right? Just 10 years out of college, nothing but the nonprofit language. And I stumbled across a fellow who had an e-commerce store, and he was just selling to search and rescue fellows, so fire department, search and rescue teams. He's just like, I'm doing this on my own. I need help. And I just showed up as the guy with multiple hats, which I was used to, but he had no marketing. Look, you've got this great idea. You've got all these videos. You've got all this equipment. What if we did a product launch? Jeff Walker has the product launch formula. I'm sure a lot of your audience will know that. I read the book and said, let's try it. Lo and behold, we got 300 members in a membership for his training on how to use the material and the equipment. And that was like the big aha moment. I loved marketing after that because I discovered oh, look at this really cool thing. We're selling, we're helping people. And then I finally began to find the language that really resonated with me. And it wasn't corporate, it wasn't ministry, but it was really the language that was authentic and from this personal branding world that I've somehow found myself in as a, call ourselves consultants and coaches, but really just helping people get results and experience transformation. And that took me on an amazing journey from ministry and changing the world to marketing and still changing the world.
Great. It'd be interesting to say, as you moved into marketing, what are some of the first steps you took as far as, I'll say, skill building or maybe changing your mindset or whatever it may be?
Yeah. A lot of it, mindset changes and skill building along the way. One thing, of course, we all know books. As I made that pivot, I had just made a goal to read 40 books in a year, albeit it was a struggle to read 2 or 3 in a year before that. So it was a big leap. And I did that. And a good majority of those were around marketing and communications and leadership and having that background in leadership development. That, and then I bought my very first course was Marketing for Missionaries by Mike Kim. And then I got Tribe by Stu McLaren through Ray Edwards' link. And then I got Ray Edwards Copywriting Academy. So a lot of it was through courses and trainings and memberships and all these programs. I like to say I got my MBA through a whole bunch of courses and coaches and consultants, people just sharing their knowledge from what I consider a ridiculously cheap rate. Now they're able to do that at volume so they can offer those skills. And then it was just taking those ideas and going, okay, Stu McLaren said, launch a membership this way. Okay, I'm going to follow it to the T. I'm just going to take this path. I'm going to follow it to the T and see what happens. And I'd get some results and I go, oh, what if I do it this way? And then going from skill building to skills application to what if I try it this way? And I just found myself geeking around in the application. And I was always technically inclined. I say the word funnels and people think, oh my God, you got to tie all this stuff together. And for me, it came naturally. So some of it was just discovering a gift set that was just there waiting to be unpacked. Because I've always been a little bit geeky and nerdy, whether it be building computers or figuring out how software works. And even in the ministry world, I was always the one who figured out how to build the missionary website for our team. Never up to par of what I would sell somebody now, but it was a lot of that. And from there, it was just seeing how people could use help. And so it's just showing up as a problem solver and figuring it out as I went and making sure I solved the problem and being honest about that. I never sold somebody on, hey, I'll do this for you. And I don't know what I'm doing, as much as you apply the rates that apply to your skill set and your confidence in your ability to deliver.
Yeah. And one of the things I share with my audience is that from your corporate world, you may have relied on your position, your titles, those kinds of things. But now all of a sudden, if you're going out to talk to somebody outside the corporate life, those don't mean much. You have to actually prove value. And I can imagine you kind of have built that same thing and you help others with it.
Yeah, very much so. And that was a gift coming from a different background instead of corporate ministry, showing up and having to provide an enticing offer because essentially it was applied sales to convincing somebody of why they should donate money to make something else happen and applying that to their lives. There was a value, there's a sense of inspiring and transpiring an exchange that made people feel good inside to cause something, whatever that cause may be. And so that was a real gift. But of course, I lacked the language of the business world. And so those bridges were challenging, but then it really did give a large gift of translating that and really having, in the end, what we should all have, empathy. And I like to say I spent 10 years training in empathy and leadership so I could become a good business leader. And one of those leadership qualities is communication, thus marketing.
Yeah, I was just recently talking to someone else was when we talked about marketing yourself and some surprisingly enough, we agreed that listening was a big piece of that. You really have to find out what their problem is. And it's not about what you want to sell. It's about the problem they need to solve. And of course, as Mike Kim has often said, marketing is not closing a sale, it's opening relationship. And so that whole idea of it's not just as we make that shift from our corporate world into the online or the wide world of business, we got to think about opening relationships. And I'm sure that's exactly what your stuff is geared to do.
Yeah, that quote really transpired. The idea that I love to say is we're starting movements, right? And we're leading not just a business, but we're really leading a community towards transformation. And the idea of listening in our marketing became really prevalent after I discovered with my one client that we launched that membership. Eventually, we plateaued the business and we hit this really sweet spot at $12,000 a month, over 1,200 members. Like, wow. And then we spent 6 months spinning our wheels going, where did the growth go? But I had been tinkering so much that I found myself in this place of becoming the automated a-hole. I had over automated everything, and the relationship building and the whole thing had dwindled away. Not that automation doesn't build relationship, but in the sense of I got caught up on all the hype. Well, you got to put these counters here and you got to create false urgency and you got to trick people, right? And you get caught up on all these tactics. And this audience was having none of it. So really just got stagnant and stuck. And that's really when I discovered there is a really important way to do marketing. And this is why Mike has been saying you should open relationships, not just close the deal. And that's when I sat down and I was like, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a way to leverage automation in a way that's authentic, creating empathy, building bridges of trust, and not just tricking people and pulling people into that impulsive moment to buy. And that's when I sat down and created the Listen framework. You mentioned listening, right? The art of building empathy requires two parties listening to one another and hearing one another out. And that's an incredible opportunity that automation gives. And so I decided to give it a semantic place. Okay, here's the things that are going on. Let's create an acronym. And anybody using something called the Listen framework can't help but apply empathetic tactics, good marketing communication when they're using that, rather than hooking and hacking and baiting and just going for the click. Put your mindset in. I'm here for the people. The money, the income is just a reward for serving people well.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that whole concept that you have of movement, I'm really intrigued by that because as you describe it, it's more than just movement in a social sense. It's more of, even as a personal brand, you can in a sense look at yourself as a movement. And maybe you could say some more about that.
Yeah. So the whole concept of movement to me is really predicated back in my ministry days. I was in an organization called YWAM, or Youth with a Mission. And we always said, we're a family engaged in a movement. And the whole idea was we're community and we're headed a direction together. And that requires a movement leader. And so the idea of starting a movement is, you step in as the leader, but then you're creating momentum for a community. And in the instance, giving them momentum, not only towards their transformation, but momentum towards who they can impact. And so they're able to pick that up. And sometimes with a coach, they coach someone, there's an incredibly transformative moment. And then the coachee becomes the next coach. And sometimes they even get certified by the coach. And so certifications are one mechanism that we see movement. One application that I recently have seen is with the John Maxwell Group. Right? John Maxwell, massive leadership trainer, but it was John Maxwell, the leadership guy, and he had a small team. And he did that for years and countless books. I don't even think we could count the number of books he put out on the topic of leadership. But there was no multiplication of John Maxwell's training, John Maxwell's style of leadership. And then they came out with the John Maxwell team coaching program. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, there are all these John Maxwell trained coaches in the last 4 or 5 years. I meet somebody at every conference. It's like, I'm on the John Maxwell. And part of that comes through mutual connections. That's a movement. He now is able to leave a legacy, which I get really passionate about. The idea of leaving a legacy is a movement, is something that surpasses your lifetime. Another age-old one coming from the ministry background. And the whole idea is Jesus created a movement. And this is one of the longer lasting movements out there. He took 12 guys and some gals and said, hey, here's what you need to go share with the world. And they're able to turn that over and over. And here we are, at least 2,000 years later, professing and believing from the same set of values. And that's an incredible idea to be able to pass that on, not only monetarily, but in terms of life transformation, people living amazing lives. And what a gift that we live now, that we can live these amazing lives in beautiful homes and fed. It is an amazing gift that a movement provides. And that movement is really a sense of momentum for the community. And that multiplication thereof.
Sure. And I can see how, even though some of my audience say they have a skill of logistics or some particular skill that they want to share, but you think of all the new talent and talent from different places, these people can leave a legacy in developing that talent with whether it be logistics or some other particular skill that they have, so that, again, they may not think of themselves as a movement, but I'm sure they would probably resonate with the idea of legacy. And this is how they would share that legacy of their expertise and knowledge in a business sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really does carry out that transformative continuing action through other people. And one of the greatest benefits of when you lead a movement is you become a point of reference. And so that's a big part, because there's no greater marketing than word of mouth and referrals. And so if you can engineer that in your marketing and sales process, that can be really good for business.
Mm-hmm. Sure. I was looking here at your listen framework. And as you say, a lot of it is conversational based, and you engage with people, but then you also ask them questions, it appears, and then following up with some teaching. So maybe step through your listen framework and give us an idea of how you use that to approach marketing.
Yeah, absolutely. So the idea of the listen framework is, right, these are the 6 stages of the customer journey summed up, and we can move in and out of using automation. So just really quick, the L is locate. So the idea of going and locating your perfect client, your perfect customer, knowing who you're going to reach. And then after you locate them, you want to invite them in, because we're using the word movement. I like to say, invite them into the movement, right? Invite them to a place to belong. Invite them to take the next action, right? This is often the place where we're collecting their email address and saying, hey, here's this free gift in exchange for that email address so we can stay in touch. This is, of course, the beginning of the use of automation, where you can think about, okay, what do I do here with automation to build relationship? And so after we invite people in, we got to think of the follow-up in terms of survey. And I like the word survey because it's this element of you got to make proactive choices in your marketing tactics to get to know people, to build that bridge of empathy. And so survey is really meant to be put out there in forms of questions in your email. So maybe in your second automated email autoresponder, you ask a question and say, hey, hit reply. Or you can actually use a quick survey form. There's a lot of tactics that can apply with the idea of building relationship. And you can even do an application for a discovery call. And then you want to move into this element of teach. And it's really important to give people a taste of what you're bringing in terms of transformation. So teaching the points of transformation is where people believe they'll get the value from the exchange, which leads to the idea of empower. So the E in listen is empower. And I like to say we're empowering people with the purchase. And for me, this is to your question about mindset earlier. The biggest mindset shift I had to make towards sales was realizing I'm not selling to get the exchange of money. I'm making the sale to get somebody to make a mindset decision to move in a specific direction, therefore empowering them. And I always like to stop here and say this is similar to something I did in ministry. We went out to Nepal and we did this leadership development training over a course of a week. We offered it for free. The first time we did it, it was, great. Day one, amazing group of people. They have this amazing experience. They can't wait to come back. Who doesn't show up on day 2? Everybody from yesterday. A whole new group of people. We got to start day 1 again. Day 3, you get a hodgepodge of the 2 groups. You've got day 1, and then new people who've also not had day 1. So you got to do day 1 yet again. And the other 2 groups are like, I guess I won't come tomorrow. Guess what? Day 4, day 1 again. Went full circle. Next time we did that, we said, you have to pay $10. No, in Nepal, $10 is a little more than $10 here. I get that, but it's still small. It's not meant to be breaking the bank. Guess what transformation happened? Everybody showed up every day of the week for the leadership development. And that is what empowering someone with a purchase can do. It shifts their mindset. They show up, they take action, and they move forward. It's not always the case. How many people finish a course? 4%. So again, you got to think about how you're juicing this in, how you're marketing and communicating post-purchase. And then, of course, sometimes we forget in this process of marketing to nurture our newfound clients and customers who showed up. So thinking about how can we use this? They just made the purchase point. How can we automate getting a referral? How can we automate getting a testimonial? How can we help them continue to experience transformation so they want to come back and take our next coaching course or work with us in a deeper manner or become certified and carry the message forward. Thus, after you nurture a community in their transformation, they start marketing your movement. So that's the listen framework, super fast. And we can go a million directions in terms of how to apply that and getting to know your audience and reaching them with your marketing message. But when you think of those 6 steps, if you do each one of those sequentially, you'll successfully communicate from a leadership platform on how you can bring transformation to somebody's life, business, health, etc.
And that's amazing, Duane. And I think what it occurred to me as I was listening there that, especially for my audience, one, they need to know it's possible to actually do some automation. But 2, I love your distinction between automation and relationship. So I wondered if you could say, okay, yeah, here's the automation that you could provide to people, but you still got a job to do as far as relationship in your business.
Yep. So there's a couple points of doing a lot of relationship. Of course, locating your audience. Yeah, you can turn advertising on. Advertising can work, but it's not always the biggest relationship. So that idea, right? We call it the wide end of the funnel for a reason. That's where you have to do the most outreach. That's where you got to go find people. That might be social media posting and actually starting a real conversation rather than just posting 127 times a day. And what if you post and had 127 comments that you could actually start conversations with? And so that element, and there's a lot of tactics that apply, whether you go on, I'm locating new people right now. Somebody might go, hey, this guy's really cool. I want to work with him. The insider language, I'm going to drop an invitation that you're going to ask me to share later on. So a little meta narrative there. And then I like to say survey. So that's a point where you can leverage some automation, but I love to pull people into a phone call, especially for high ticket. So they fill out that application, and then the teach point is more having a phone call. And there's nothing more relational than meeting in person, but at least we can meet face to face via a Zoom call now and just have a 15-minute discussion. I can say, hey, what are you passionate about causing in the world? Are you committed to causing change? What dwells up in your heart has something that must be changed in the world. And when I hear that, I can really connect and empathize with their passion and then help them communicate forward, come up with something on the spot. So my favorite way is going to that old school sales method and not just marketing through and through to sell a $20 item, but really bringing people to that high-end experience. Other elements along the way, we have email, right? Yes, you're sending people emails through automation, but there's an opportunity to say, hey, I'd love to hear from you, hit reply. So you can mix in some of those, a few question-based emails that are meant to get a response, because then you can start a conversation. Same thing happens with chatbots, right? You can start a conversation. So it's blending in and pulling people into the automation and then taking a moment to come out of the automation. One tool I use in the survey element is I have a tool called Video Ask, and it's on the thank you page. So, right, you give the opt-in, you're there, you're on this new page, it's a quick video. And instead of it being this 30-minute video about how amazing I am, all the wonderful things I can do, I'd rather just ask a question and learn about how I can help you. So I ask a couple questions. And what's cool about Video Ask is people can reply via text, audio, or video. So we can get that going in a back and forth, almost like a walkie-talkie. That's how you get this old, and you start going on the walkie-talkie element. Again, you're building relationship. And then you might say, hey, I'd love for you to show up to my webinar next week, whatever that teaching mechanism might be. And then what's cool about the teaching space as we move into that, you're automating, show up, and you're getting a little more volume. The cool thing about Zoom is you don't have to do it in a webinar function. Maybe you don't have a massive audience. Maybe you're just going to reach 100 people and you're hoping 10 people will show up and jump on a Zoom call, just like we are right now with 10 people, share your teaching, and then actually discuss it, dialogue it, take questions. And so there's an action moment to actually have interaction versus, okay, you heard me talk. Now I'm going to turn off my computer and disappear or take typing questions. And so there's always an opportunity to truly be really engaging. And in a high-end world, I love living in that high-ticket world. Smaller groups can be a lot better. Volume is amazing if you're selling something under $2,000, but really if you're selling something over $2,000, you don't need volume, you need high connection, and you really need a high conversational touch point. And then of course, anything over $2,000 at the Empower point does require the sales call, which is another great point to actually have a conversation. But you have automation to help remind people to show up. You have an automation to ping them and Hey, they didn't show up. Okay, I'm going to throw them in a no-show campaign. So you can really service your administration. Now I don't have to think about sending all these emails to make sure they reschedule and all that, or whatever your process may be. I can just make one change in my customer relationship management system and say, they didn't show up, then it pings them. Or I go, hey, this person's disqualified. They can push them and say, you know what, I want to recommend this to you. We're not a good fit. Or you can say, hey, you're ready to move on. And it can follow up in an automated fashion. So you're weaving in and out of automation, which can be complex, but it can take a large administrative load off of your back when you're trying to grow the business, especially from a one-to-one or a one-to-small group situation.
Yeah, I think in my experience, all things like masterminds and stuff have been really valuable. And so as I think of myself and my audience, as you get to, like you say, a high ticket item, that ability not just to learn from you, but to learn from each other is something that is, I think, valuable to create. And I don't know that you automate that, but the creation of that, I think, is pretty valuable.
Yeah, it is very valuable. And there's a lot of little things you can automate that are on the back end, as little reminders so that people show up, or little pings, or even your own tasks, and making sure you're reoccurring elements of running a mastermind. So that nurture element, because there's a lot of reoccurring things that happen. I love the way Michael Hyatt puts it. Automation isn't always a technical. Sometimes automation is having a template. So you don't have to sit and write something anew, but you can pull from that template, make a couple of customations and send it, and save yourself 15 minutes of writing a new email. So, right, this idea of having templates, systems, and technical automations all streamline or automate your business.
So as people I'm helping are starting out their careers, their new Encore careers, what would the things you would recommend they should think about as they get ready and, prepare to work with you? Or if they're thinking about working with you, what are the things they need to know or understand?
Yeah. So one thing, the foundation of any of this is I'm really coming in to help people ramp up their business. So there's 5 phases. You're in the startup phase. You don't need to think about funnels. You need to think about 3 important things. Who do I serve? What do I serve them with? And what story do they want to hear from me that even draws them in? So you have a personal brand narrative, and that element of that narrative reaches the perfect client fit. And so you're going to know exactly, I serve accountants in firms who are boutique and no bigger than 5 employees, right? Down to the specificity. The more specific you can get, the better, as long as there's a broad enough audience. And then, of course, figuring out that offer. Once you have that, you're going to begin selling the same thing over and over. And when it comes to automation, you got to think of your business in terms of a system. I love the book, Work the System. It really got me out of this custom, I can do this for you and this for you. And, you need that. And right, and problem solving brain of mine, I can solve too many problems in too many unique ways. We're really thinking this is the process by which I'm going to lead people. And when you as a leader can trust the process, never tell somebody to trust the process, because that doesn't make you very trustworthy. But if you trust the process and can communicate why in the value of story and in terms of a framework is great, then you come to me and go, hey, I want to do this over and over, but I have to do this task every day. Can I get it off my plate? I want to draw more people in so I can have more one-on-ones and get more bookings and get more calls, but I don't have the time to balance both serving my clients and doing this. So when you've got a somewhat of a process moving, then you move in and get the automation. And then one decision you want to make that's really wise is getting the right tool. And the first tool you're going to really want to think about, because we all like to say money's in the list. That's true. And even deeper than that, the relationship is in the list. You don't own Facebook and all your friends on Facebook or whatever it is now, since they're going all meta on us, and all the other social medias or all the others. And I don't own your podcast audience. And really, I don't even own my own podcast audience. But as soon as they sign up with an email, they say, hey, I want to come in closer for relationship. So think about how you can build that lead list. And I'm not talking about tens of thousands. That's down the road. But if you can get your first 100 or maybe your first 1,000, you're hitting a true milestone. And what you want is your first email marketing service provider. This is where you can get a lot of automation done. This is where you can get a lot of support. There's a few tools that I love. Beyond that, really, it's just a heart to keep going forward and serve.
Okay, great. Well, that helps a lot because, again, sometimes that's the first thing that I know I came up with, and I think others is, how do I even think about this? And again, we keep quoting Mike Kim, but he talks about success being sequential, not simultaneous. Having some of those sequential steps is really helpful.
It is, yeah, and it is very true. Just okay, one step forward. There's an old psychological movie, right, Bobby? Just baby steps, right? You don't have to make the big sweeping strides. It's just baby step in the right direction. And I always think of those baby steps as what am I doing to build relationship with other people I can serve?
Yeah, and I like your thought of, hey, if you've got an email list of 100 or 1,000, you're starting. And again, I get several hundred downloads a week of my podcast. And somebody says, well, that's not very much compared to Joe Rogan. I says, yeah, you're right. On the other hand, nowhere in the world would I get a chance to talk to a couple hundred people a week. So
yeah, exactly.
And the other thing, it reminds me, again, this is an off the wall story, but I talked to once an entrepreneur and his niche was helping people in the document destruction business run their business. And he said, my total worldwide audience is 3,000 companies, but he had made a pretty good living just serving 3,000 companies that do document destruction. And I said, well, that's pretty narrow.
Yeah, it's very specific, but often the more narrow you get, the higher, right? Those 3,000 companies probably make good money and can afford your services at a higher price because they're so niche, they're so focused. They're one of a few who can provide a set service.
Yeah. How do people reach out to you? And we'll include all these things in the show notes. What would you recommend people do as far as connecting or learning more from you?
Yeah, so just to follow the Listen framework, I always like to say a great place to first meet me and some of my ideas, some of my zany craziness is on the Marketing Your Movement show, where I just rant and rave about these things and how you can reach your audience, how you can build a tribe. And then beyond that, I have an invitation to get the Listen framework at listenframework.com. Just a quick rundown. It's a real brief manifesto of why I believe so strongly that this is the future of marketing, the relationship building and really framing things out. And then, of course, you'll end up in a listen sequence where you kind of get to taste that. So that's the best way you can stay in touch. I'm all over social media as Duane Zingale, if you can figure out how to spell that. But I'm sure it'll be in the show notes. If you start a conversation with me, you're bound to have my attention, and I'm happy to talk about anything.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier, and I was looking at your website where you do have that response thing. And I thought, that's the first time I've seen. But that, again, technology is amazing in today's world. It used to be, okay, yeah, I have to type out a long response in some email, and here it is. I could just do a quick video reply to you. And I go, wow, technology is really something.
Yeah, it really is. And what's cool about video on a sidebar is just how intimate it is, right? Because you can see my inflection points. I can get my hands in the pictures. You can pick up on the nuance that otherwise you got to see each other in person. Audio, amazing. Text-based, amazing. But video from a digital standpoint is one of the most amazing tools that we have and we're able to give at this standpoint with technology.
One final thought occurs to me, again, coming from a business background where we never wanted to ever make mistakes to an entrepreneurial background where you move ahead with 60% of the answer. I encourage my audience to say, okay, get out there and practice, whether it be video, do it imperfectly if you have to. One, we can fix it. Two, you're more authentic. Any thoughts you have on that?
Yeah. So something is just to get out there and do it. Often we're all caught up because we're looking at, but Joe Rogan, he does it so good. As well, Joe Rogan got his training being an MMA fighter and then becoming an announcer and then starting a podcast. So you're somewhere in your journey. Don't worry. You're probably starting at one, and it's probably one of your parents or your siblings who are going to love everything you do because, well, they raised you. And that's, I put my first podcast out. Guess who was like, oh my God, I love your podcast. My mom. And of course you're like, sure. But that's just the effect is we're all somewhere. And the people who join you early are coming for your authenticity, not your perfection, not how amazing or articulate you are. They're coming because they resonate with either your story or the way you portray it or that sense of who you are in terms of personality. And those early people who come to you are going to be some of the best people for that sense of who are you nurturing for a movement, the early adopters. And so that 60% will get you over the hurdle of getting something out there versus just waiting until it's 99.9% right. And then you spent all that effort and time to only get it out there and discover, that doesn't resonate. And so sometimes in the marketing world, we got to say experimentation with speed gets a lot more out and learned than perfection that never gets sent to the world. Got to trust the experiment. You get a lot of data online, who listened, how far they watched. And that can teach you a lot about where people are falling off because you're not articulating something clear and et cetera.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I could appreciate, I started out and I agonized over every piece of content, whether it was on the website or an email or whatever. And I finally said, okay, I guess it's better to publish than it is to try to perfect it.
Yeah, it is. It's a lot better to publish. And sometimes you'll learn the hard way that maybe I should have waited a little longer to publish. So there's a point of, diminishing returns on energy and jumping on and ranting on my podcast because I just had a thought that I didn't think through. Didn't always perform as well because I didn't give it enough time to flush out. And so you really got to think of it from an economic standpoint. Where is this sweet spot? Okay, I've given it enough time. Now I'm beating a dead horse, as the expression goes. Maybe I should just push publish.
Right. Yeah. And again, I think all of us is the whole idea of relationship. If we're really listening, it'll probably improve our speaking too. So that's part of it.
Yeah, that is a huge part of it, is just creating that connection.
Duane, thank you so much. I really appreciate your sharing all your wisdom, knowledge. And as we mentioned earlier, your contact information will be in the show notes. So again, thank you so much and have a great week.
Thank you, Lynn. It was great chatting.
Again, many thanks to Duane for sharing his insights, his knowledge, and his perspectives. As a wrap up, some of the questions we covered were how Duane pivoted his life's work from ministry to marketing, how he brings empathy to marketing. It's not just about the automation. He shared his listen framework and how it can help people create their marketing message. And then how working with small audiences can be rewarding. And in the show notes, we're going to have links to Duane's website, his Market Your Movement page, and also his listen framework. Remember, with an Encore career, the rewards are great. You can work when you want, where you want, and do the work you love. As your coach, I will help you go farther and faster based on what I've learned from being on this journey for several years. You have the time, attention, and money to make this leap, so let me help you. If you're having thoughts about starting an Encore career, please contact me and take the self-assessment quiz. The quiz will help you get some quick clarity around what's possible for you in the future. And after you've listened to the podcast, I encourage you to visit my website at linfrias.com and download the PDF as a guide to help you take the next steps in pursuit of your Encore career. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.